On today's episode, you're about to hear the kind of story that shakes the walls of injustice. One woman walked into a medical clinic expecting care. What she got was racism, humiliation, and false accusations. But 15 minutes later, her husband walked through the door, and everything changed. Stay with us, because what happens next is both terrifying and unforgettable. It was supposed to be a routine appointment. A joyful one, even. Danielle Carter had been looking forward to this for weeks, the 4D ultrasound where she'd finally see her baby's face in detail. She imagined Ethan beside her, holding her hand, whispering jokes in her ear as they watched their future come into focus. But when she stepped into Eastbrook Women's Medical Center alone that spring morning, something in the air already felt wrong. Too sterile. Too sharp. At 6 months pregnant, Danielle radiated the kind of natural beauty that stopped strangers in their tracks: warm cocoa skin, soft curls pinned into a low bun, and a dress the color of a clear sky. But to the well-heeled white couples in the waiting room, her presence didn't elicit admiration, it summoned suspicion. She didn't belong, they silently implied. Not in this posh Atlanta clinic with walls made of glass and floors of polished stone. The receptionist didn't say it aloud, but her eyes did. Her clipped tone did. Her silence screamed it. Danielle sat down in the waiting room, clutching the clipboard of intake forms like armor. She focused on breathing, slow, steady, like she was already in labor, pushing through invisible pain. She thought of Ethan, probably wrapping up work at the Department of Justice, unaware of how small and alone she felt in that moment. She thought of the little life inside her. "We're okay, baby," she whispered. When the nurse finally called her name, there was no warmth. No welcome. Just a gesture and a cold walk down the hall. The walls were lined with portraits, smiling white mothers cradling perfect newborns. None looked like her. The exam room was clean, but it felt like a trap. Then came Dr. Lindsay Halbert. The moment she entered, Danielle knew. There was no "good morning," no handshake, no softness. Only icy eyes and a smirk that said, "I've already decided who you are." When Danielle explained that her husband was on the way, the doctor didn't nod or offer understanding. Instead, she leaned in like a snake, voice thick with contempt. "Let me guess," she said. "You don't know who the father is." Danielle froze. The doctor didn't stop there. Maybe he decided he'd had enough of playing house. Typical. The room spun. Danielle tried to gather herself, to stand with dignity. "I confirmed this appointment. I came here respectfully." The doctor leaned even closer. "You people are always respectful when you want something." It wasn't just bias. It wasn't even subtle. It was targeted, intentional, laced with hate. And then, like a scene from a nightmare, Dr. Halbert accused Danielle of stealing her Cartier watch. "Security's on the way," she hissed. Danielle hadn't touched anything. But suddenly, she was a suspect. Alone. Pregnant. Trapped. The door clicked shut behind Dr. Halbert like the slam of a prison cell. Danielle stood frozen in the sterile room, the scent of antiseptic now suffocating. She wasn't just shocked, she was trembling, fighting the impulse to cry or scream. Instead, she placed a protective hand over her belly and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." But the truth was, she didn't feel like she had anything. No support. No voice. Just fear, and rage curdling beneath the surface. She reached into her bag to grab her phone and call Ethan, but before her fingers could even tap his number, the door burst open. 2 security guards entered. White. Emotionless. Their posture already assumed guilt. "Miss Carter," the older one said. "You'll need to come with us." She blinked. "For what?" The younger guard, a muscular man in his 20s, stepped forward. "There's been a report of theft. Dr. Halbert says you were the last person in the room with her missing watch." Danielle shook her head slowly, as if denial might somehow rewind reality. I didn't take anything. You can check the cameras. I never even touched her desk. You can explain all that downstairs, the older one said coldly. I'm pregnant, she said again, her voice cracking now. My husband's on his way. I don't feel safe. You'll have your chance to talk later, the younger one muttered. Let's go. She was flanked. Escorted through a side corridor not meant for patients. Past locked doors, flickering lights, and reminders that no matter how glossy the surface looked upstairs, the rot always festered underneath. When they reached the basement-level security room, it was like stepping into a different world. Cold fluorescent lights, a bolted chair, walls bare except for outdated monitors blinking like they were watching ghosts. Sit, barked the younger officer. Danielle did as told. Slowly. Her hands never left her stomach. I need to call my husband. Please, she said softly. Hand over the phone, he snapped. I just want to let him know where I am. Now. She surrendered the phone. He snatched it, turned it off, and slid it into a locked drawer. We'll hold on to that until we finish this. Tears pooled in her eyes. This is illegal. You can't just detain me like this. I haven't done anything. You're not under arrest, the older one said, pretending calm. But we're investigating a credible report. A credible lie, she spat, finally raising her voice. But it didn't matter. They weren't listening. They weren't investigating. They were holding her in a windowless room, without evidence, without rights, and worst of all, without a clue that her husband was a man who would burn this place to the ground with a single phone call. Minutes passed like hours. The younger officer leaned against the wall, chewing gum like it was her dignity. The older one scribbled in silence. Danielle's body ached. Her stomach tightened. The baby stirred. And then, finally, above the buzz of the flickering light, she heard it. Footsteps. Measured. Controlled. Each one a warning. The door opened, and in walked Ethan Carter. He didn't shout. He didn't demand. He didn't need to. He simply stepped into the room like he owned it. Gentlemen, he said, voice like thunder trapped in velvet. You're going to explain why my wife is being illegally detained, without counsel, and without her property. Right now. Danielle gasped, relief crashing into her like a wave. Ethan. He moved to her side instantly, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. I'm here, he said. It's over now. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ethan Carter stood tall, imposing in a tailored charcoal suit, his DOJ badge still visible against his chest like a shield. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The smirk fell off the younger officer's face. The older one stiffened, suddenly aware that whatever authority he thought he had was now dwarfed. I want names, Ethan said, his tone flat. Who authorized this detainment? Where is the incident report? Where is the evidence? The older guard cleared his throat. Sir, we were just following protocol. Dr. Halbert reported a theft. Dr. Halbert made an accusation based on nothing but bias and assumption, Ethan cut in. You didn't search the room. You didn't verify the report. You detained a pregnant woman, denied her communication, and confiscated her property, all without due cause. That's not protocol. That's a civil rights violation. Danielle sat upright now, her hand on her belly, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Every word landed like a hammer. I want the security footage pulled up, Ethan continued. Now. Or I escalate this to the state attorney general. The officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. Ethan slowly retrieved his credentials and held them up with sharp precision. Deputy Director. Office of Civil Rights Enforcement. You are now under direct federal oversight. Do you want obstruction charges to be the next item on the table? That was it. The threat wasn't implied, it was legal. The older guard scrambled to the monitor, fumbling through controls. The screen blinked, showing camera angles from the hall, waiting room, and finally, outside the exam room. Danielle leaned forward, her fingers gripping the arms of her chair. "Play it from 10:41 a.m., Ethan ordered. The footage began to roll. There was Danielle, entering the room alone. She sat. Never touched the desk. Never moved toward the tray where the doctor had supposedly left her Cartier watch. Then at 10:52 a.m., Dr. Halbert exited, paused, touched her wrist, and visibly panicked. "Pause," Ethan said. "Zoom in on the tray." The guard complied. The image sharpened. The watch was still there. Danielle gasped softly. She left it. Ethan didn't blink. Roll forward. The footage continued. A cleaning staff member entered briefly, wiped down a surface, and left. At 10:59 a.m., the watch was gone, but Danielle hadn't even been in the room. There was no evidence, only assumption. The younger officer swallowed hard. It must have been the janitor. Ethan turned slowly, eyes narrowed. You think? Or did you just assume the black woman alone in the room was the threat? No one answered. He opened the drawer and retrieved Danielle's phone, placing it gently in her hand. "I'm taking her upstairs," Ethan said. "But this isn't over." Danielle stood slowly, her strength rising with each breath. She didn't say a word to the officers. She didn't need to. Her silence was a verdict. As they exited the room, the halls seemed quieter. Even the lights seemed dimmer, like the building itself knew it had been exposed. The elevator doors opened. "I want to see that doctor again," Danielle whispered. Ethan nodded. "Let's go." The elevator doors opened onto the top floor of Eastbrook Medical Center with a soft chime that sounded far too gentle for what was about to happen. Danielle stepped out first, her posture straight, her chin lifted, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear no longer had the right to bend her. Ethan followed just behind, the embodiment of restraint wrapped in power. His presence alone turned heads. Every eye in the hallway locked on them, not because Danielle stood out, but because someone finally stood beside her. A uniformed clinic administrator was waiting nervously near the glass conference room. His eyes widened as he spotted Ethan's badge and Danielle's face. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter," he stammered, already pale. "We've convened an emergency review with our internal ethics board. Dr. Halbert is inside." Ethan's voice was cool. "Good. Let's begin." Inside the boardroom, 3 members of the clinic's ethics panel sat at the far end of a gleaming glass table, 2 men, 1 woman, all white, all visibly unsettled. At the other end sat Dr. Lindsay Halbert. Her posture was rigid, her arms crossed. The smugness she had earlier was still there, but now it trembled beneath the surface, struggling to hold form under pressure. Danielle took her seat across from the woman who had humiliated her. Ethan remained standing. The chair of the ethics board cleared his throat. "We understand a serious incident took place this morning involving your visit, Mrs. Carter. And Mr. Carter, you've made clear you intend to pursue federal action." Ethan stepped forward and placed a slim folder on the table with a soft thud. "My wife was falsely accused of theft. She was illegally detained, denied communication, and subjected to racial humiliation by one of your lead physicians. I've included video stills, a transcript of events, and a formal notice of intent to file litigation." Dr. Halbert scoffed, breaking her silence. "This is absurd. I followed procedure. There was a missing item. She was the last person in the room." Ethan's voice cut across the air like a blade. "You didn't follow procedure. You followed prejudice." Dr. Halbert opened her mouth to respond, but Danielle's voice rang out first. "You didn't see a patient. You saw a problem, she said softly, but with resolve. You saw a black woman alone, and assumed I was a liar, a thief, someone beneath your care. Danielle's eyes didn't leave hers. You said I looked like I came from a bus station. You said I probably didn't know who my baby's father was. You didn't examine me. You didn't ask questions. You just passed judgment. The silence in the room was deafening. The board members exchanged glances. The female board member looked visibly ill, as if just realizing the scale of what had taken place inside their pristine clinic. Ethan spoke again. We're asking for more than disciplinary action. We're requesting her immediate suspension, a public apology, full patient rights review, and the implementation of mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. If this board fails to act, we escalate. And trust me, escalation from my office won't be quiet. The board chair cleared his throat. We will begin proceedings immediately. Effective today, Dr. Halbert is placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. The words hit the room like a small explosion. Dr. Halbert stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. This is ridiculous, she hissed, and stormed out without another word. No one followed her. No one defended her. Because there was nothing left to say. The door shut behind Dr. Halbert with a bitter finality, leaving behind only the rustle of papers and the stunned silence of people who had just witnessed something much bigger than an administrative hearing. Danielle didn't flinch. She sat motionless in her chair, eyes fixed ahead, heart pounding not from fear, but from release. It wasn't over, but something had shifted. The weight of invisibility she had carried for years, walking into rooms and being overlooked, mistrusted, or scrutinized, had been lifted, even if just for a moment. Someone had seen her. And that someone had not only believed her, but fought for her with the full force of justice behind his name. Ethan placed his hand on hers. She turned to him, lips quivering slightly, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She just squeezed his hand, a simple gesture that said thank you, I love you, and I'm still here all at once. Outside the conference room, the mood in the clinic had turned uncertain. The receptionist who once ignored Danielle now avoided eye contact entirely. The same women who had clutched their handbags tighter in the waiting room now looked on with unease, as if seeing the consequences of their silence reflected back at them. Danielle and Ethan left through the front doors, hand in hand. The sunlight hit her face as they stepped outside, and she blinked against it, taking in a long breath of fresh air like she hadn't breathed in hours. I don't just want to move on from this, she said softly. Ethan turned to her. What do you mean? I mean, this happened to me. But it's happening to other women, too. Women without husbands who are federal officers. Women without anyone to show up. And they deserve better. Ethan smiled, not the kind of smile that ended in laughter, but the kind that came with pride. Then we make sure they get it. Within 24 hours, the story spread. Not by Ethan, but by a nurse who had heard everything and had seen enough. An anonymous tip reached a local reporter. And soon, words like racial profiling, illegal detainment, and civil rights violation began circling headlines in Atlanta's evening news. Eastbrook Women's Medical Center released a formal statement that afternoon. It was polished, cautious, corporate, but it acknowledged a serious breach of patient dignity and safety. Dr. Lindsay Halbert had been placed on indefinite administrative leave. An internal investigation was underway. But Danielle knew statements didn't fix systems. Action did. 2 weeks later, she stood behind a podium outside the same building she had been dragged through like a criminal. Now, she stood flanked by her husband, her OB/GYN from a new clinic, and 3 local civil rights attorneys. Reporters gathered, microphones pointed forward, a sea of expectant faces. Danielle cleared her throat and leaned forward. Danielle took a deep breath as the wind stirred her curls gently. The sun had broken through the overcast sky, casting a soft glow over the podium as if the day itself had decided to listen. Behind her stood not just Ethan, but a growing coalition of advocates, community leaders, clergy, medical professionals, and ordinary women who had quietly messaged her stories of similar pain, now stepping into the light. "This isn't just about me," Danielle began, her voice calm, but steady. "This is about every black woman who has ever walked into a space meant for healing, and instead been treated like a threat." A ripple moved through the crowd. Microphones leaned in. Phones rose to capture every word. "It's about the systems that assume we don't belong, the people who make snap judgments based on skin color, and the silence that follows after harm is done, because too often, we're expected to just accept it and move on." Danielle paused, scanning the sea of eyes before her. Some were wide with disbelief. Others brimmed with tears. All were listening. "I was detained without cause. Denied my voice. My dignity. And all while 6 months pregnant. But what if I hadn't had a husband who worked in federal civil rights? What if I had been just one woman in that basement room, voiceless?" Her voice didn't shake. She had lived that question. Racism in healthcare is real. And it's deadly. It doesn't always wear a hood or shout slurs. Sometimes, it wears a white coat and a polite smile. Sometimes, it hides behind phrases like protocol or routine investigation. There were murmurs of agreement now. Some audience members nodded solemnly. A young woman in scrubs near the front wiped her cheek. "We're not asking for special treatment," Danielle continued. "We're demanding fair treatment. Respect. Humanity." Behind her, Ethan stood quietly, his hand resting over a folder labeled Policy Reform Proposal, Patient Rights Initiative. He hadn't spoken publicly since the incident. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken volumes. Danielle closed with the same grace she had carried through the worst day of her life. "I won't be silent. I won't shrink. And I will not let my child grow up in a world where their mother's voice was dismissed in the name of comfort or convenience. We are here. We belong. And we will be heard." A hush settled over the crowd for a moment, then came the applause. Not loud. Not performative. But sustained and real, the kind that carried weight. The kind that meant something had shifted, however slightly. The local news aired the full speech that night. But more than that, it went viral. And behind the scenes, Danielle's formal complaint sparked a wave of pressure on the Eastbrook Clinic. The Department of Health and Human Services opened an inquiry into the facility's practices. The Georgia Medical Board received petitions with over 100,000 signatures calling for Dr. Halbert's license to be reviewed. But Danielle wasn't finished. In the weeks that followed, Danielle's story became a symbol, first for black women in Atlanta, and then for women across the country who had endured subtle, casual, or outright violent racism in healthcare settings. Messages poured in. Some from other patients at Eastbrook who'd had similar encounters. Others came from nurses and receptionists, good people who had stayed silent too long. Danielle didn't want fame. She wanted change. So she went to work. With Ethan's legal guidance and the support of several civil rights groups, Danielle helped launch the Maternal Dignity Project, an initiative focused on legislative reform, staff training, and mandatory transparency in private medical facilities. It began locally. But it didn't stay that way. By the end of the year, 2 other clinics in the Southeast adopted policies inspired by her case, including installing internal review committees with diverse representation, required de-escalation training, and anonymous patient exit surveys with real oversight. Dr. Lindsay Halbert, meanwhile, disappeared from the public eye. The Ethics Board concluded its inquiry with a scathing review. Her license wasn't just suspended, it was revoked. Publicly. Her name became a cautionary tale, especially for those in power who thought they could continue behind closed doors. And yet, Danielle's most powerful moment didn't happen at a press conference or during a policy meeting. It happened months later. She was back at a different clinic. A new OB-GYN, a black woman, stood beside her, smiling softly as the 4D ultrasound came into view. There it was. A tiny face. Clear as day. Lips, nose, fingers curled like a dream. Danielle covered her mouth and let out a soft sob, this time, not from fear, but from overwhelming joy. Ethan sat beside her, hand clasped in hers, eyes misted. "We made it," he whispered. She nodded. "We did." The technician smiled. "Would you like a copy of the image?" Danielle looked at the screen one more time and nodded. "Yes. And please send a copy to the office." "Whose office?" Danielle smiled. "The Department of Justice. We're building something. I want our daughter to know where it all began." The technician chuckled. "She's already part of history." Danielle looked at the monitor one more time. "No," she whispered. "She's the future." And in that moment, in a quiet, unassuming room where dignity was finally honored, Danielle Carter found peace. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because she had lit a spark that would keep burning long after the headlines faded. This story reminds us that sometimes, it takes just one voice to expose a system built on silence. One woman. One moment. One refusal to accept humiliation as the cost of survival. As Danielle Carter proved, we don't rise by staying quiet, we rise by standing, even when our knees shake. As always, if this story moved you, please subscribe to True Echo for more powerful, real-world stories. Comment your thoughts below, we read every single one, and share this video to keep the conversation going. Your silence may protect you today, but it won't protect the next woman. Speak up.